Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. On the morning after her 6th birthday, a little girl stepped outside her home to play and was never seen again. On December 20th, 1980, in Carson, California, Eileen Rebecca Scott laced up her roller skates and went outside her mobile home community, something she had done countless times before. Neighbors saw her skating through the park. Her brother was also outside with her for a while. It seemed like a normal day in every sense. When her mom poked her head outside to check on her daughter just a short time after she had gone outside, Eileen, who was called Becky by family and friends, wasn't there. Her skates were later found by the front door of their home, but her regular shoes were missing. Becky's brother didn't know where she could be, and her mom couldn't find her anywhere. Her mom did spend a little bit of time searching around the park for her daughter. Perhaps she had wandered off, perhaps she had gotten distracted by something, but she found no signs of her. She soon decided she had to call the local authorities and report her 6-year-old daughter as missing. Becky Scott had disappeared, seemingly into thin air during broad daylight, leaving behind no clues. Where is Eileen Rebecca Scott? Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Where Are They podcast. Becky's case stood out to me for a few reasons. First, she was only 6 years old. In fact, she had just turned 6 the day before she disappeared. Second, she left behind 0 clues, at least that we know of, or that was documented at the time by authorities. Since this case does take us back many years, all the way to 1980, it's possible some information has been lost. Third, a lot of time there are what we call usual suspects, especially in the case of missing children. You know what I mean, I'm sure, and sadly it's often family or someone that the family knows. But it doesn't appear that this case has any usual suspect and seems to point to a random crime of opportunity, an abduction. There were also several active serial killers in the area, and we'll talk about a few that are sometimes brought up in Becky's case. However, none of them seem to particularly target children. But despite the lack of clues and the lack of just general information in Becky's case, I feel we need to talk about her. We need to remember this little girl who was just trying to be a kid in 1980. A little girl who had her whole life ahead of her, who had a future, who had a family that loved her. And she was described as an easygoing, happy child. She was known to her family and friends as Becky, so that's how I'll refer to her also. Becky's mom and dad would go on to separate, however, and she would live with her mom, Lois, her brother Jeff, and her mom's boyfriend in a mobile home park in Carson, California. Carson, California is a diverse city in the South Bay region of Los Angeles County. It's located about 13 miles south of downtown Los Angeles. Carson has a strong working class and middle class identity. It's known for its mix of residential neighborhoods, industrial zones, and some major commercial corridors. The city is home to Cal State University, Dominguez Hills, which plays a central role in the community there. Carson is also bordered by a few major freeways, including the very heavily traveled 405, the 110, and the 91, making it a key transportation and logistics hub. It also provides easy access in and out of Carson. In the late 1970s and 1980s, Carson, like much of LA County, was experiencing higher crime rates than today. The population at the time was around 80,000 residents. As I had mentioned, Becky was living with her mom, her brother, and her mom's boyfriend in a mobile home in the Rancho Dominguez mobile home park. On Friday, December 19th, 1980, Becky celebrated her 6th birthday. The very next day, a Saturday, her family was at home and Becky wanted to try out her new roller skates. Her brother went outside with her at first before he went off and did something else. Becky had gone outside that morning around 10:30 a.m. And there were several neighbors who were also home at this time, likely more than usual because it was a Saturday. Many of them said they saw Becky skating around. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary in any way. Around noon, Becky's mom, Lois, poked her head outside to check on Becky as she had done periodically. Only this time, she didn't see Becky anywhere. As she started looking around for her, she became alarmed even more, noticing that Becky's roller skates were sitting by the front door, but her shoes were missing. So clearly at some point, Becky changed out of her roller skates and put on her shoes. So what was she doing outside? Now, at first, of course, Lois thought Becky must be around here somewhere. She must be playing. Maybe she got distracted. Maybe she was playing with somebody else in the neighborhood. And Lois walked around up and down the streets looking for her. Her alarm grew as each minute went by where she couldn't find Becky. She asked a few neighbors who said they had seen her earlier, but they didn't know where she was currently. So, of course, Lois's panic grew and her search became more and more frantic until she finally decided that she had to call the police for help. Becky Scott was officially reported as missing that afternoon. Now, from what we can tell, and remember, this is many, many, many years ago, so it's really hard to understand fully the search efforts, but it seems that authorities did come out and start searching for Becky right away. They even brought out canine search dogs that afternoon. The original thought was that Becky had wandered off. Perhaps she had become hurt. Maybe she needed help. Maybe she had become lost even. Aside from authorities and even the search canines, many, many volunteers came out to help and search for Becky, especially as word got around the mobile home park that Becky was missing. They began searching sheds and even underneath the mobile homes, wondering if Becky could have crawled underneath one and become stuck. They didn't find the little girl anywhere. Now, the area of Carson, California is heavily populated. It's a Los Angeles suburb city, and they were in a mobile home park. There was lots of people around, and it was broad daylight. But no one recalled seeing anything or anyone unusual in that area. The search dogs also couldn't pick up any of Becky's scent. It seemed that she just vanished into thin air right outside of her mobile home. Authorities began to believe that she was likely abducted. Of course, the first person they looked at was her mother's boyfriend, Harry. And he would actually go on to be arrested and sent to prison on unrelated charges in Orange County. Some even talked about how Becky and him didn't get along either. But law enforcement said that he had an alibi that checked out and he was cleared as a suspect. So who else could it have been? Authorities were not suspecting any family members, so her case was soon classified as a non-familial abduction. But clues were almost non-existent. There weren't water sources to search nearby, not really, although the ocean was about 10 miles away. But certainly a 6-year-old isn't going to wander to the ocean unseen. And there weren't a bunch of ponds or creeks or rivers around to search either. This was very residential and commercial. So many do believe the abduction angle. It seems to be the only thing that makes sense. Although, to this day, some residents of that mobile home park wonder if she did indeed manage to get underneath one of the mobile homes and become trapped. Now, while certainly possible, I'd have to wonder why no one would have heard her calling out for help, or after all of these years, these decades, no sign of the little girl has turned up. Now, that mobile home park does still exist today, although many of the mobile homes have been switched out into newer models. Is it possible she is still there somewhere underneath one of the remaining older mobile homes? There were also several serial killers active in the Los Angeles area during the 1980s, although Becky didn't really fit any of their target profiles. First, there was the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. He seemed to target older victims, although one of his victims was 16. But his first known crime was also 4 years after Becky's disappearance in 1984. Second, Joseph James D'Angelo, also known as the Golden State Killer, who was also active around the time of Becky's disappearance. His youngest victim seemed to be the age of 18, however, he wasn't known to target children either. Then there's William Bonin, or the Freeway Killer, as many know him. But his MO doesn't fit Becky's abduction either. He was known to be active in the late 70s and early 80s, but he seemed to target boys and men. William Bonin murdered and sexually assaulted teenage boys and young men from 1979 until his arrest. His victims were often found along or near freeways throughout Southern California, earning him the nickname the Freeway Killer. But that's not all. Michael Player, the Skid Row Slayer, was active in 1986, 6 years after Becky's disappearance. He was known to murder many homeless individuals in the LA Skid Row area. Chester Turner was convicted of killing at least 13 women from the late 1980s into the 90s. While Becky's case is considered a stranger abduction, I'd have to think that Becky might have known her abductor or somehow been convinced to change out of her skates into her shoes and go willingly with this person. It was daylight on a Saturday in a mobile home park. Had she made any kind of fuss, I'd have to think somebody would have heard her or seen something. Now, I can't help but think of another young girl who vanished in a mobile home park and was later found deceased at the hands of a neighbor. Sandra Cantu vanished on March 27, 2009 from the Orchard Estates mobile home park in Tracy, California. After a massive multi-agency search that lasted about 10 days, her body was found inside a suitcase on April 6, 2009. It had been dumped into an irrigation pond a few miles from her home. Melissa Huckabee, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher and mother who lived in the same mobile home park and was well known to the community, was arrested for the crime. Now, I'd have to think that everyone connected to Becky in any way was looked into, as well as those that lived in the mobile home park. But since this happened so long ago, we really can't say much about that investigative process. I don't know what happened to Becky Scott that day, but I am curious to know your thoughts. Do you have any additional theories or possibilities? What do you think happened to Becky? Becky is described as a Caucasian female who was only 6 years old when she vanished in 1980. She had brown hair and brown eyes. She was last seen at the Rancho Dominguez Estates mobile home park in Carson, California. Becky was wearing a pink or red blouse, long green pants, and brown sandals. She also has a brown birthmark on her right hip and a scar over her right eyebrow. Anyone who might have any information regarding the disappearance of Becky Scott back in 1980 is asked to call the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department at 323-890-5529. Thank you so much for listening to Becky's story today. As I had mentioned earlier, we don't know much about this little girl's disappearance, but I do want to keep her name out there, and I do want to remember this little girl. Is it possible she's still out there somewhere, alive? Thank you so much for being a supporter of our show and for helping us do what we do. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons story. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.